Okay. Good morning, everybody. Do you hear me without the microphone?
Yes.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And with the microphone? So I see everybody speaking Wafian, which is a very important Jewish language in Morocco. Okay, so let's start. This morning, after seeing all these different Berber Jewish community, and after we came to Marrakesh, it's specifically in Marrakesh, we are talking about the meeting between the Sephardic Expulsees from Spain, in other words, the Megorashim, and the local indigenous Jewish population, or Berber Jews. So, first of all, in order to give you some idea of how did the Jewish life in Spain before the expulsion look like, and how basically Sephardic Judaism prior to expulsion was not actually a Mediterranean culture. In other words, what I'm trying to say, and you can see very well presented on this map, is that 80 to 90% of Sephardic Jewry lived deeply in the mainland of Spain, not on the seaside. And I will make parts of the map bigger so that you can see how remote from the sea different communities were, right? So even when some of them look on the bigger map as if they were on the sea, when on a smaller map, when you look at them at the bigger map, you see that they actually were not. So you see, even Girona is remoted from the sea. Not to speak about Segovia and Avila and Toledo, which are all communities of the mainland. Or Cordova. So Malaga basically is one of the few communities, or Barcelona, few communities which are on the seaside. So this is very important because Sephardim are basically becoming exclusively Mediterranean people, or almost exclusively Mediterranean people, or primarily Mediterranean people, only after the expulsion. Because they are establishing, as you can see on this map, they are establishing their communities mostly around the Mediterranean Sea, right? So, you can see that all the people who came to the communities which are right on the seaside, or at least not remoted from the sea, more than 3 days journey, let me put it the biblical way, they maintained community across. They maintained their new virtual Sepharad. So basically we can say that in 1492, virtual Sepharad was established, that it was a thalassocratia, in other words, an entity that crosses the sea. So basically virtual Sepharad is kind of Jewish Venice, with the sea in the heart of it, right? In the heart of the virtual Sepharad, there is a sea. And the people...
It'll be easier to see if we could lower these spotlights there.
Probably. Okay, so here behind this door, yes.
And I think so, it needs a little more focus.
Me or the presentation?
That's a good one.
Focus. No, this is making it smaller and bigger. Who's our focus man? Do you know how to focus this, Richard?
Should make the same.
I don't see it. No. No, you can't. Okay. Oh, okay, beautiful. Okay. Find the right spot, and meanwhile I'll see. So you can basically see how people who left Spain came to Salonika, and then later from Salonika they went to Amsterdam to serve as rabbis, or they went to Venice to attend yeshivot, or they went to Livorno to publish their books, and so on. So basically, Sephardic Jews, and especially their rabbinical elite, is a trans-Mediterranean elite that crosses the sea in all directions all the time. The communities, like Fez, you can see, they were close enough to the sea. They were not seaside communities, obviously, but they were close enough to the sea to maintain contacts with other Sephardic communities. Marrakesh, however, in 1492, the Megorashim came here, but they became kind of an isolated enclave. In other words, their status of Megorashim was obvious only to their Berber Jew cohabitants, or the people who share the same space and same city. But they've lost their contact with other Sephardim. So they stayed Sephardim only in the eyes of the Toshavim. They stayed Megorashim only in the eyes of the Toshavim. And eventually, two communities mingled totally. The Sephardic Jews of Morocco stayed different only in few costumes, but basically they switched to Moroccan Judeo-Arabic, and we can say that by and large they became assimilated, even though they themselves would say that they were not. Okay, so this was what I call creation of virtual Sepharad. So basically, to paraphrase the famous phrase from Pirkei Avot, Al Shelosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed, on three things the world stands, I will recruit that sentence to speak a bit about Sepharad. So we can basically say that this new entity called virtual Sepharad stands on three things. The sea, as I explained previously, but I'll re-explain it, or I'll explain it again. All those who were too remoted from the sea could not maintain contacts with other Megorashim. Consequently, they assimilated, whether into Judeo-Arabic community, or into Yiddish community, or into any other Jewish options. Only the Sephardim who stayed close enough to the sea could maintain virtual Sepharad and its internal contacts. The language and the law. So we'll speak about each of these things separately. The sea, I've already explained, I don't intend to return on that, but the language. I've discussed this issue with Professor Savar on one of our rides. There was an idea. That Jews spoke Ladino in Spain before the expulsion. And linguists especially, now this idea is close to the hearts of some Jewish historians, including the late Professor Yom Tov Assis. But linguists don't really go for it, certainly not present-day linguists dealing with Jewish linguistics. And why is that so? First of all, because there is no such a thing as Spanish language. There is Castilian, and there is Catalan, and there is Valencian. So in Spain, different languages are spoken. The fact that today we call Castilian Spanish is because it's official language of the entire country. But there is no such thing as Spanish language. There is Castilian language, language of Castile. There is Catalan language, language of Catalonia or Catalonia. So Jews in each and every of those provinces spoke the local language. The Jews of Catalonia spoke Catalan. The Jews of Valencia spoke Valencian. The Jews of Portugal spoke Portuguese. The Jews of Castilla spoke Castilian. And the Jews of Andalusia spoke Arabic. Now, in the late 15th century, Andalusia was reduced only to Granada, but Jews of Granada spoke Judeo-Arabic. Now, it goes without saying, it's obvious and clear, that all these Jews speaking all these local languages had a vocabulary of 200 or 250 Hebrew words, which they would interpolate into their Castilian or their Catalan. The same way a Jew in New York today would say to his wife, "Darling, would you like to make the Kiddush in the sukkah or inside?" But this doesn't constitute for a new language. It's not another language. And first of all, because if you are a Jew from New York, you speak New Yorkian English just like everybody else, with a totally fabulous New York accent, right? And if you are a Jew from Alabama, you speak Alabama English with Alabama accent. And all of you use words like Kiddush and Sukkah and so on. But it doesn't constitute for a new language. Because there are no grammar differences between the language spoken by the Gentiles and by the Jews. There are no syntactic differences. These are basically, and if there are, like, whatever, what's doing? The Jews of New York say what's doing. So that's not really grammatically or syntactically English, but that's translation from Yiddish. But that's one single expression. And maybe you can have 10 like that. It doesn't make a new language. So Jews of New York don't speak Junglish or Jewish English. In the same way, the Jews of Catalonia didn't speak Judeo-Catalan. They spoke Catalan with few Hebrew words, full stop. So, when all these Jews left all these places, the things would be much easier. Let me show it on a map. The things would be much easier if, let's say, Jews of Granada were to leave all together to Fez. And if Jews of Malaga were to leave all together to Oran. And if Jews of Barcelona were to leave all together to Salonika. And if Jews of Toledo were to leave all together to Sarajevo. But obviously that's not what happened. So, basically in every single community of the Expulsees established in the virtual Sepharad, you had people from all over Spain. So that basically brings about the known fact that in the 16th century, the synagogues established in the Ottoman Empire many a time bore the name of the province from which Jews were coming. So you would have, in one Ottoman city, you would have a synagogue called Castile and a synagogue called Aragon. Or you would have a synagogue called Aragon and a synagogue called Portugal. Now, all the way the Jews lived in Spain, they had this idea of unity. They believed that all the Jews, first of all, that all the Jews of Spain are probably the same, and that other Jews are a bit different, but that's their problem. Now, once they found themselves together, living next to each other, they recognized how different amongst themselves the Jews of Spain themselves were. Not only linguistically, because some of the people spoke Catalan and other people spoke Portuguese and other people spoke Castilian, but also minhag wisely and Hebrew pronunciation wisely and interpretation of Jewish law wisely. So these people do Shechitah that way and these people do it the other way. These people sing this thing in these piyutim and other people sing other piyutim. These people include these psalms as introductory texts to the, as facultative texts to the main body of Jewish liturgy. Other people include other psalms. Tolerance was not really a concept of 16th century, so people were establishing all over different synagogues, and they prayed in different manners, which is less problematic. But they had different rabbinical codes. Now for you guys, most of whom are coming from the Commonwealth, that's not such a problem because in America you have Orthodox Judaism and Conservative Judaism and Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism and so on. And everybody is Jewish and there is no one single Jewish community with one single body. But people who were coming from Spanish Jewish tradition, Jewish community was a unified thing. There was a rabbi who represented the Jews in the in King's Court, right? And the community was quite centralized. So for them to see different Jewish communities next to each other was quite confusing and basically very, very theologically problematic. Because of out of the nation who believed that it had one single constitution and that every single community and every single member is governed by the same constitution, all of a sudden they discovered that they are a tribal community which has different tribal Torot which seem at the moment as ununifiable. So you would have, for example, people who would make neder. What's the neder in English? Oh yeah, oath, right?
Yeah.
That they will never go to the other synagogue. So in 16th century we have a situation in Skopje. In 16th or 17th, in 17th century we have a situation in Skopje in Macedonia where one synagogue is burned, and the Hazan of that synagogue made an oath previously that he will never go and pray in the other synagogue. And now that's the only existing synagogue. So he writes to the rabbis of Salonika, and he says, I made an eder that I will not go ever to that other synagogue. But now my own synagogue is burned. What should I do? So he receives an answer. No, he receives a question back from Salonika, and they ask him, well, when you made your oath, did you have in mind that even if your own synagogue burns down, you would still never pray in that other synagogue? So he says, oh no, I never had that in mind. So the rabbis told him, well, if you didn't have that in mind, that means that you are okay. So, but we can see the emotions and tensions between the communities. Most problematic thing from the point of Jewish law, however, was the fact that each of those communities had its own rabbinical court. So Jews didn't have, you can survive having different folklores, but no nation can survive having different constitutions, having different laws, right? So, what happened is that the main problem of entire Jewish or Sephardic 16th century, one entire century was dedicated to the question of unification. Unification around the language and unification around the law. So I'll say first few things concerning the law. This was never a problem before. Why? Because most of the Jews lived in the communities in which their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-grandparents were born. They didn't have a clue how different are the Jews in other communities. If a single Jew from Malaga went to Toledo, he had to discover the Jews of Toledo are crazy. But then he could either return or just stay there. And the same goes the other way around. If a Jew from Toledo went to Malaga, he would discover the Jews of Malaga are different. But most of the Jews lived in their places. Now today, imagine, you have in Istanbul, in Salonika, in Fez, different Jewish communities with different Jewish customs, with different shechitot, with different liturgies, with different pronunciation of Hebrew, with different languages, a total chaos. So one rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Berav, decides he wants to re-establish the Sanhedrin. Then the main corpus of Jewish law, we can run it by the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin can decide permissible, prohibited, tahor, tameh, right, pure, impure, and so on. What do you think who didn't accept it? The rabbis by and large. Nobody ever asked children what they think about it. Nobody ever asked women what they think about it. Nobody ever asked laymen what they think about it. The rabbis asked themselves, and they didn't like the idea. They didn't like the idea for the same reason why we don't have Sanhedrin today. Because every single rabbi prefers to be the king of his own community than to be a clerk of Sanhedrin. Right? So, that project, which started with Hidush Semicha, in other words, renovation of the idea that rabbis are appointed in order to be reappointed into Sanhedrin. The idea was bankrupt. One of his pupils, though, Rabbi Yosef Karo, understands that the problem is still there. So we need another solution because the first solution was not accepted. So to him, the next solution was to have one single book that all Jews would accept. And best candidate for such a job was obviously Maimonides' Mishneh Torah. So he asked himself why Rambam actually was not accepted by the rabbinical body. And by the rabbinical body by and large? No, of course not. He was appreciated, he was loved, he was everything, but he was not accepted as the Jewish constitution. So the traditional Sephardic answer was, this is because his writing wasn't academic. He didn't have footnotes. That was the traditional answer. He didn't have footnotes. He didn't bring the sources of his decisions. So Rabbi Yosef Karo decides he will re-academize Mishneh Torah. He will bring footnotes. And that's when he writes a book called Kesef Mishneh, which is his commentary to Mishneh Torah. And Kesef Mishneh does everything that Maimonides was accused of not doing. In other words, it brings all the sources. Now, in Sephardic tradition, it's extremely important how you name your book. The books are not named in a haphazard manner. So basically you can say that if a person is writing a book for 10 years, he is contemplating about its future name for 11 at least. So the book Kesef Mishneh is called Kesef Mishneh, and Kesef Mishneh means the secondary money. Now secondary money, where does it come from? It comes from the parasha on Joseph and his brethren, that basically Joseph returned to their luggage. He returned the money that they came with to Egypt to buy food. And now when they are trying to convince their father, now when their father sends them again, he tells them, take the first money, because maybe this was returned to you by mistake. And then take the secondary money with you for the new wheat. Okay, that's the pasuk. Secondary money. So obviously we can see that Rabbi Yosef Karo considers this to be second attempt to feed the Jews Torah. And that's why the book is called Kesef Mishneh, and obviously it reflects his name, Yosef, very strongly. Now, he wrote it, and the main answer of the rabbinical body was, you shouldn't have bothered. Yeah, you shouldn't have bothered. In other words, come on, this was a nice traditional answer why we didn't accept Maimonides, but there are other reasons why we didn't accept Maimonides, and obviously the reason is because it would make us superstitious. Because every single man and every single woman and every single child could know what Jewish law teaches by opening a single book. So that would deem the rabbis as unneeded. Yeah, so exactly. That's the English word, which I don't know to pronounce. Now, so he then, still having the same problem in his mind, he decides to take a third turn to solving the problem. We said, re-establishment of the Sephardim didn't work. Academization of Maimonides didn't work. So he says, we can see from his action that he actually understands very well the mindset and the mentality of the rabbinical elite. Why? Because he establishes the Bet Din of 3 dead rabbis. Now, from the very fact that he does this, we can say that he understood that living rabbis will never accept authority of living rabbis. But dead rabbis is better. It's easier. So he basically establishes the Bet Din of 3, Rif, Rambam, and Rosh. So we can exactly see what he is trying to bypass and what he is trying to achieve. What he is trying to achieve. There is a problem. The Jews are disunited between themselves, and they can never unite with local Jewish communities to which they came. An overwhelming majority of them joined the Musta'arabi communities. In other words, the Arabic-speaking Jewish communities, whether in Maghreb or in Mushrik, in the east. So, he said, let us take Rif, which is basically the embodiment of North African Jewish tradition. Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fasi. Why? Because he lived in Fez. Fez is in Morocco. But the guy was not born in Fez. He was born in Kairouan. It's still North Africa. Kairouan, right? So he moves from Kairouan to Fez. Kairouan. That's not in Morocco, that's in present-day Tunisia. Yeah. So he moves from Kairouan to Fez. Obviously nobody in Fez would call him Al-Farsi, because he's not from Fez. So where did he got his name Al-Farsi? When he moved from Fez to Spain, to Lucena. In Lucena he became Al-Farsi. Now, he and his rulings represent well the tradition of Jewish Maghreb, which included Spain. Everybody knows, or I hope everybody knows, the famous song by Yehuda Halevi, when he says, Libi b'mizrach ve'anochi besof ma'arav. My heart is in the east, in Jerusalem, and I am at the end of the west. The end of the west is Spain. Al-Maghreb al-Aqsa, the most far away west. Al-Maghreb al-Aqsa. Now, so Rabbi Yosef Karo says, let me take one man who represents Maghribi Andalusian tradition. Let me take another man who represents Andalusian Mushriki, Eastern tradition, Syria, Egypt, and so on. That's Maimonides. Why? Because Maimonides is coming from Andalusia. He moved to Fez, from Fez to land of Israel, from land of Israel to Egypt. And he reunited the Jews in that area, Egypt, Syria, and the land of Israel. And his rulings were accepted in Mushrik, in the Jewish East, as Halacha. So he says, let me have one Mughrabi Andalusian, one Andalusian Mushriki, Andalusian Eastern, and let me have one guy who will represent Christian Spain, the tradition of the Jews of Christian Spain. That's Rosh, who was a Jewish refugee who came from Germany to Spain, to Toledo, and over there he was appointed the chief rabbi. Now why would Sephardi Jews need chief rabbi, a German refugee? Because they were trying to make their Judaism fit into the Judeo-Christian culture. And the local Sephardic rabbis, every single every single spiritual entity, every single church, sect, denomination, whatever you want to call it, has two kinds of leadership. You have conservative leadership that imposes yesterday on today. And you have charismatic or prophetic leadership that imposes tomorrow on today. So every single religious tradition is torn between those two traditions, those two tendencies, those two notions. People who pull to the future, the prophets, the charismatic leaders, the mystics, and people who want to preserve the past. Now, rabbis by definition are conservative leadership. Rabbis by definition are imposing yesterday on today. So the Sephardic rabbis in Toledo at the moment, they were still best representatives of Judeo-Islamic tradition. So their interpretation of Judaism was not too European. It didn't fit the EU standards. So that's why the secular leadership of Jewry of Christian Spain is appointing a German rabbi, because they want him. German Jews have had for a long time history of living in Christian culture. So the people in Spain want somebody to interpret their Judaism in a way that it fits into the Judeo-Christian canon. Now, what Yosef, I know this is too much information, but we will have to live with it, because that's the way the things are. So, Rabbi Yosef Karo establishes the Bet Din of 3. Obviously, he doesn't have in mind unifying the Ashkenazim also. His main concern at the moment is to unify the Sephardic Expulsees with Mughrabi and Mushriki Jews, with the Jews of North Africa and the Jews of Middle East. And he says, I will run every single law brought by Rosh in Christian Spain. I will run it by 3 authorities. Every single law that Rosh brings, that the son of Rosh in his book called Arbaat Turim, 4 Turim, brings, I will run it by 3 authorities. By Rif, by Rambam, and by Rosh, and we will decide by majority opinion. This book is called Bet Yosef, the house of Joseph. And the house of Joseph is the synagogue mentioned in the same parasha where Kesef Mishnah is mentioned. Bet Yosef is the house to which the brethren are brought in front of Joseph while they still don't know that he is Joseph. So we can see also how his own self-understanding develops. And in Kesef Mishneh, when he was naming the book, he was still very subjugated. He was subjugating himself to authority of Maimonides. But now, the book which brings every single law according to the order of Rosh and runs it by the three authorities, he calls it by his own name, the house of Joseph. And this time, interestingly enough, the overwhelming majority of the rabbinical body accepted him. This was why? This was, on one side, solving all their problems, because it was all of the halakha on one place, and on another place, in another hand, you still needed rabbis. It was so voluminous and so complicated and so confusing that, unlike Mishneh Torah, Bet Yosef didn't rule the rabbis out. So it was helping the rabbis by bringing everything into one single book, but still the layman needed the rabbi to interpret that book. So the rabbis told him, oh, now you are talking. Now you are talking. You didn't write the book that deems us superficious. You made a book which helps us rule the people. So they turn to him and they tell him, why don't you, this is too complicated. This is for us. For lay people though, you should make a book of conclusions. Here you have the entire process. Now, make an abbreviated form of the book with conclusions only. That book is called Shulchan Aruch. Now, Shulchan Aruch, again, if we go back to my previous claim that the names of the books written by Sephardic authors are super turbo premeditated, then we have to think where the words Shulchan Aruch are taken from. And the obvious answer is, anybody who ever saw any Hollywood movie which contains funeral knows the verses which Protestant pastors read over somebody's grave. Mizmor leDavid Adonai Eloi, Lord is my shepherd, I shall not miss anything, and so on. So one of the verses over there is Ta'arof Shulchan Lefanai Neged Sorerai. You will prepare the table in front of me against my enemies. So the fact that Rabbi Yosef Karo takes the name Shulchan Aruch, the table prepared against your enemies, means that he feels now as King David. He feels as unappointed or unanointed king of the Jews because he won in the battle of the halakha and his opinion was accepted. And this is when, how do you call Ashkenazi Toledo? Krakow. The biggest and most important Jewish community at that particular moment in the Ashkenazi world was the community of Krakow. And the spiritual leader of Krakow, that's the way you crack the word in English. So, in Krakow, that's the way the Polish people call it. In Krakow, there was an important Jewish community with a very important rabbi called Rabbi Moshe Isserles, Rama. Okay, the abbreviation of his name is R-M-I, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, Rama. So he said, wow, look at this. Sephardic Jews are getting unified around one single book. This is historical opportunity for all the Jews to unite. Because if we, in Hebrew, we would say mitfas tramp. So if we would get tramp on them, then three different Jewish traditions, Christian Spain, Maghrebi, Mushriki, and Ashkenazi tradition would be all presented in one single book. So he writes his glossas to Shulchan Aruch, and until this very day, Jewish life is governed by Shulchan Aruch. Everybody opens Shulchan Aruch. The Sephardim follow the big letters. And the Ashkenazim have to check always what's written in small letters. which are the glossas of Rabbi Moshe Seles, because many a time he reinstitutes the option that was turned down by Yosef Karo. Why? Because Yosef Karo decides by the majority opinion. So he has Rif, Rambam, and Rosh. Rif and Rambam agree on most places, so he says the halacha is like that. But the Ashkenazi Jews had tradition which is more similar to the tradition of the Jews of Christian Spain. So the tradition of Rosh. So what Rama does is he says, but in these places we still do, and then he says what they do. This is how Shulchan Aruch was created. So we are here. Unification of the law. This was the imperative of the hour. Jews needed to agree on one single constitution in order to reinstitute or re-establish their idea of being a single nation, single religion, single people. Now, few words, but only few words really, about the unification of the language. As I said previously, Jews came from Spain speaking a bunch of languages. They came to Maghreb, where people spoke Judeo-Arabic. They came to Mushrik, where people spoke other kind of Judeo-Arabic. And interestingly enough, here the Sephardim, law-wisely, they wanted all the Jews to unite. Linguistic-wisely, they united themselves. So Ladino actually as a language was created in the Ottoman Empire only after the expulsion on base of different different Iberian / Romance languages spoken in Spain. So how does it work? And I'll try to keep it simple. As I said, in every single port city in the Ottoman Empire, you had some people from Catalonia who obviously spoke Catalan, some people from Portugal who obviously spoke Portuguese, some people from Castilla who obviously spoke Castilian. For the next 100 years, everybody sticks to his own dialect. However, though, by the end of the 16th century, a new Jewish language is created, who is mostly Castilian as far as grammar is concerned, who is mostly Castilian as far as lexic is concerned, but it has many lexical borrowings from other Iberian languages, and it also has syntactical constructions from other Iberian languages, and then lexically speaking, it also borrows words from the languages of contact, Ottoman languages, right? Like Ottoman Turkish, Greek, Serbian, and so on. So, this is the unification. Now, this unification reached also the northern Morocco, where a specific dialect of Ladino was developed. It is called Hakitiya. It is more exposed to ongoing Spanish influence. Why? Because Morocco is right across the Spain. While the Jews of the Ottoman Empire didn't have any contact with Spanish, so they proceeded speaking Spanish the Iberian way prior to the expulsion, containing phonemes such as je, sh, just like in French or in Catalan. The Jews of Morocco, being the fact that they were so close to Spain, in 17th and 18th century, when Spanish-speaking people, or when Castilian speakers decided to reduce 3 Spanish phonemes to one single, Arabic, ch. So, the medieval Castilian j, like in words, gente, gentil, was converted into Arabic ch. The medieval Spanish sh, like in word enxugar or ashugar, was converted in 17th, 18th century to Arabic ch. Enxugar, achugar, chugar. Then, the medieval Spanish j, I already done. Now j, like in the words Judeo, okay, was again reduced to one single phoneme, Arabic ch. So in modern Spanish people say judío, mujer, hijo, ojo, enjugar, jugar, and so on, but in medieval Spanish you would say mujer, ojo, hijo, Judeo, gente, gentil. So the Jews of Morocco, the Jews of northern Morocco who spoke Hakitia, they were exposed to these developments in modern Spanish, so they switched to modern Spanish phonology. So the Jews of Morocco do say, just like Castilian speakers, they do say mujer, ojo, hijo, and so on. Okay, so these are the three columns on which the Spain, the virtual Sepharad exists. Now I want to bring your attention to a curiosity, and then we will discuss it. Okay, so this is the synagogue from Fez, and it's called Al-Fasiyin, the synagogue of Fezians. Now, why under the sun the people of Fez would call their synagogue the synagogue of people of Fez when everybody in Fez is from Fez? Right? The answer is not everybody in Fez is from Fez. Some people in Fez are Megorashim. So they established their own synagogues. And then synagogues which are established by the Toshavim are called the synagogue of the locals. You follow? 17th century. And still, people from Spain don't define themselves as locals. 17th century, and people who pray in this synagogue are seen by themselves and by the Sephardic Megorashim as the people of Fez, while the Sephardic Jews are not people of Fez. They are people of Sepharad, even though we are already 200 years after the expulsion. So, you will see. Okay, so this is the Al-Fasiyin synagogue, right, in Fez. It exists even today. There was a box club in it, but then it was removed. Boxing club. When Jews left Fez, somebody bought the building of the synagogue and made a gym and box club inside it. Now recently it was reinstituted as a synagogue. Okay? And you can see how in urban centers the Toshavim are influenced by Sephardic culture. So they have Azarat Nashim, they have a special place for women in the synagogue. So basically, the culture is dynamic. And if the Sephardic Jews, for whatever reasons, end up in a village, within a generation or two they are assimilated into village ways. And then when the Toshavim come to major urban centers, they absorb a lot of Sephardic culture also, even when they stay as separate Berber Jewish community. So, this is Rafi talking to one of the groups of the Al-Fasiyin. We can see how similar, but probably Shalom will speak about it, but we will see how these things are similar to the synagogues in Spain itself. Now this is Sephardic synagogue in Fez, and as you can see, nobody calls it Ibn Danan, because in order for the pronunciation Ibn to be instituted, we would need to move the synagogue to Egypt or Syria. It's called Awen. That B is not pure B, it's something between B and V. So it's called Awen Danan. Awen Danan, this is the Sephardic synagogue of Fez, one of many. The Sephardic synagogue of Fez. So here you can see Migdal Es, they call it. So this is the place where Torah is read, and in Morocco it actually perpetuates the way these things were built in medieval Jewish Spain. Okay? So this is the Ibn Danan synagogue, this is the Azarat Nashim, and now I'm coming to Marrakesh. So in 1492, there was already a community of local Jews. The Spanish Expulsees are coming, and they are establishing their own synagogue. This is the synagogue that we will see today. It's well preserved. Obviously, it was renovated a million times ever since 1492, but the name is still the same, Al-Azma, which means Gerush, expulsion. So the synagogue is called Expulsion. We have the same case in the Ottoman Empire, where also some of the synagogues are called Kal Gerush. Here, the name is not in Hebrew. The name is Arabic translation of Gerush, Al-Azma, which means Gerush or expulsion. So, the synagogue, you will see, the synagogue has windows towards the courtyard, but it doesn't have outside windows. This is very typical of Jewish Morocco, right? So in order to attain privacy and so on, the windows on the synagogue many a time are towards the inner space, but not towards the outside space. So I will not. The sitting in the synagogue is obviously Sephardic. Okay, so I will say. I'll send you all these pictures. Okay, so this is the Melach, and this is the entrance to the synagogue in the Melach. And now I will say few things about the Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya, who established the synagogue. He was an established Sephardic rabbi. In other words, he was not somebody that came to Marrakesh 6 years old and developed here. He was trained and appointed a rabbi in Spain. He comes to Marrakesh straight and directly. In other words, it's not that he stays 10 years in Fez, 15 years in I don't know where, and no, he comes straight from Spain to Marrakesh. He establishes
Can you repeat his name, please?
Yitzchak Deloya. Now, Deloya is sometimes spelled as two words, and sometimes it's spelled as one word. In any case, De means from, and Loya is the name of the Spanish city from which the family originated. But then they moved from that city to another city in Spain. In that another city, which we don't know which it was, they were called Deloya, because now they were newcomers. And then from there, they came here with their name Deloya. So, some of the things, now in Marrakesh, as I said, this was too remoted from the sea, so the Sephardic Jews of Marrakesh could not really marry across the sea, bring chatanim or send kalot across the sea, bring rabbis, send rabbis, print books, and so on. So they were kind of isolated. They still saw themselves as different than Toshavim, but gradually they assimilated into the Toshavim. And today, the only way to say who in Marrakesh is what is to check their ketubot. The ketubot of Toshavim do not contain special clausula, which is always brought in the ketubot when the husband of Sephardic extraction is getting married. And this is according to the custom of the Jews of Castile. And many a time it also includes the obligation on part of the groom that he will not take another bride unless specific permission of the first one, according to the custom of the Jews of Castile. So sometimes it's only according to the custom of the Jews of Castile without any specification, and sometimes they say he will not take another bride according to the custom of the Jews of Castile. So basically, you can say that Sephardic Jews who came to Marrakesh established themselves as Sephardic. They became an isolated Sephardic enclave. They didn't have contacts with other Sephardim. Gradually, they dropped their Spanish. They switched to Judeo-Arabic. Still, however, they had a separate synagogue, but it doesn't mean that it's not racial. And these are not racial laws. So it doesn't mean that people belonging to other communities and backgrounds were not allowed to the synagogue. And it doesn't mean that some people of Sephardic extraction didn't leave the synagogue because they didn't speak with the rabbi, they hated the shamash, they couldn't stand the wife of the gabbai. So it was, people were moving from one community to another. But this community kept its Sephardic liturgy. So one of the differences is that they say Chatzi Kaddish, or half Kaddish, after reading Torah at Minha of Shabbat. That's ruling of Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya. And the tradition in Marrakesh says that Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya and Rabbi Yosef Karo met and they discussed the issue, and Rabbi Yosef Karo was not capable or able to convince Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya, so he stuck to his previous opinion on two things: Chatzi Kaddish, in other words, you do say Kaddish after Torah reading on Minha of Shabbat, and there is no need for halak. The Jews of Marrakesh eat normal kosher meat or normal kasher meat and not the halak. Now, historically speaking, Rabbi Yosef Karo was 4 years old when he left Spain. They left to Portugal. 2 years later, he left Portugal and he went to Ottoman Empire. The possibility the two of them met is inexistent. And even if they were to meet, Rabbi Yosef Karo would be 20, when Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya would be 60. So Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya wouldn't even listen to him. But the fact that Jews of Marrakesh, or the Sephardic Jews of Marrakesh have this story, it basically is trying to protect their tradition from attacks of other Sephardim by saying even the author of Shulchan Aruch itself could not convince Rabbi Yitzchak Deloya. Our distinction from other Sephardim is as old as this halakha authority, and it was okayed by Yosef Karo himself. Yosef Karo himself, the author of Shulchan Aruch, could not win this war. That's why we are okay with doing it. Okay, so a few more things. So this is the difference. You see, they say, everybody knows that joke, but I just need to repeat it in this place. How does the Jewish version of Robinson Crusoe functions? Titanic goes down, there is one single Jew, there is one single survivor, he happens to be Jewish, he swims to an island, and then 20 years later, or whatever, 50 years later, a scientific expedition finds him on the island. And he shows them around, and he says, this is my summer kitchen, and this is my winter kitchen, and these are my two synagogues. So they say, oh, so there were other survivors. He says, no, it was only me. So they say, why the heck do you need two synagogues? And he says, well, this is the synagogue where I pray, and this is the synagogue where I would never go. So your identity is not only how different you are from totally different people, but it's also, if not mostly, how different you are from very similar people. Or what makes you different from similar people. So, what makes the Sephardic Jews of Marrakesh different from other Sephardim are these two things: Chatzi Kaddish and Kasher Halak. No need for Kasher Halak. Now, there are things in which they are different than Berber Jews of Marrakesh. And this is, Sephardic Jews have their weddings only on Wednesdays.
Why is that cheap?
They say, the ketubah I've already explained. Now, they are also, you can see that they insist on gender policy that they had in Spain and not fine-tuning it with Islamic tradition of Marrakesh or Berber tradition, which are more strict. So they still have the very liberty approach of the Jews of Sepharad, in which the widow inherits half of the property. So imagine it's a big thing. Let's say that somebody has 5 sons. So 5 of them each will get 10% of father's property. And the wife will get 50. Okay? So, Shabbat Hazon, this is beautiful. Shabbat Hazon, you know what Shabbat, everybody knows what Shabbat Hazon. Shabbat Hazon is the Shabbat prior to Tisha B'Av. So many Jews, even though it's Shabbat, no, okay, let me fine-tune it even more. It's prior to Tisha B'Av, it falls in the beginning of the month of Av. For the rest of that week, we are mourning, and then there is the question: what do you do on Shabbat? Do you do complete Shabbat as if there was no mourning at all, Do you do complete mourning as if there was no Shabbat at all, or do you do 50-50? So, most of the Jews say it's Shabbat, so we can't mourn, but still we don't eat meat on Shabbat Chazon. Even though it's Shabbat, you are allowed to eat, and you are allowed to sing, and you are allowed to have wine, but don't have meat. It's improper because the Shabbat is just about to come. And some Jews say, no, it's total Shabbat. So the tradition of Sephardic Jews of Marrakesh, unlike the Berber Jews of Marrakesh, it's total Shabbat. You dress beautifully, and you sing, and you eat meat, because, why? It's tradition of the Sephardic Jews, of the Spanish Jews, that they were not there when the temple was destroyed. That they were already in Spain. Now, people do not understand why is this important. But this is important because they were facing on daily basis accusations of Tauside. They were facing on daily basis accusations that they killed Jesus and that Jesus was God. And so consequently, they were God killers. So the Sephardic Jews found a way around it. They say, maybe Jews killed Jesus, but it wasn't us. We were not there. We were here ever since the first temple, right? So it's a mythos. It's a mythos which is based on political need of the community to say, and you will see that some people even put this into writing. So we'll find a Jew from Amsterdam, Yitzhak de Pinto, when he faces the accusations by the anti-Semites how Jews killed Jesus, he says it's not the Sephardic Jews. We were not in Judea at that date, right? So how do we call this in law? Alibi, right? So they had an alibi. They were not there when the crime was executed. So when they came here, they proceeded. Now, out of this mythos, certain halachot developed. If you were not there when the temple was destroyed, then on the Shabbat, prior to the Shabbat, you still eat meat. You see? Okay. So now, two stories. The Jews of Marrakesh would not be Jews of Morocco if even the Sephardic, rational Aristotelian, or whatever rabbi which established the Sephardic community over here was not converted into a major Moroccan classical Jewish saint. So, Rabbi Yitzhak Deloya was such a saintly person that when he would come to wash before the tefillah, and there is still a whale, do you call it whale? Mayam, how do you say Mayam in English? Yeah. No, it's... Yeah. Sister, whatever, cistern would probably be the best word. The water, yeah, it's on the street, on the main street of the city. So it's not spring. So whatever. The story goes like this. Remember, always in Moroccan Jewish narrative, especially in oral Moroccan Jewish narrative, land of Israel brings special authority. So whenever they want to say that something is, whenever they want to underline, to highlight, to marker something, they connect it to the land of Israel. So the story goes like this. A rabbi from the land of Israel, okay, that means he's super turbo learned, he's super turbo tzaddik, he's from the land of Israel. So he comes here, he meets with two local rabbis, one of Berber extraction, another of Sephardic extraction. They have halakhic discussion. Rabbi Yitzhak Deloya says what he thinks, and the other rabbi says what he thinks. And the rabbi from the land of Israel says that the other rabbi is right. And then, during the night, a Magid comes to him, celestial being, which uses your own voice to tell you things. That's Magid in Jewish sources. So the Magid comes to the rabbi from the land of Israel and tells him, you were wrong. That way, the halacha is that way only on the earth, because people on the earth don't understand things. But in heaven, everybody accepts the opinion of Rabbi Yitzhak Deloya. So this rabbi from the land of Israel runs to the house of Rabbi Yitzhak Deloya to apologize for not accepting his halacha, which is even accepted in heaven. And then he sees him washing himself before the prayer. and he looks and he see how the water is coming to the rabbi. Usually you have, to bring water up, but the rabbi was such a saintly figure that the laws of nature didn't apply. So the water would come up to him. And later, the rabbi went back into the house. What? Yeah, but then later, immediately as the shamash of the rabbi came out to bring some water to the house, he needed to use and to put it into, and to bring it up, and so on. So the guy recognized that this was a miracle. So basically, you can see how the veneration of saints in Jewish Morocco is all encompassing, and it doesn't really matter whether you are a Toshav or you are a Megorash. All Jews of Morocco, and this is also, once you are allowed to the pantheon of saints, right? Actually, you think you would be remembered for what you are, but that's not what happens. Once you join the pantheon, then your real character is blurred out, and you become just an ordinary saint. So, for example, the way the Jews of Morocco remember Maimonides is by doing all kinds of miracles, just like any other Jewish saint. And the mathematics is very simple. You are a Jewish saint, we all appreciate you, and now please do what saints do. Okay, so I'm finishing. I just want, we discussed all of this, yes. So just to show you how different things are between the north and the south, Spanish was totally dropped, even before it ever developed into Judo-Spanish. There are no traces of Hakitia, certainly not of Ottoman Ladino. However, though, in the north of Spain, people proceeded speaking Spanish until yesterday. So here you have Libro de Actas de la Junta. This is why I brought specifically this particular example. It doesn't say de la Junta. It says de la Junta, and Spanish ch is represented with Hebrew chaf, right? De la Junta, selecta de la Comunidad Hebrea de Tangier. So you can see how the Judo-Spanish survived in the north, and it was also recastellanized because of the connection with Spain. Thank you.
Okay, just until Shalom sets up, just wanted to check if everybody picked up their passports and credit cards last night. Okay, and I'd like